and we are live. We're broadcasting. I have no way to know because we're doing it through this new app, it's StreamYard. Thank you for letting us do this with Radha Stirling, and I hope everyone on Facebook is watching us and following with us this special edition with Radha Stirling. Hi, Radha. How are you?
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
It's always a pleasure to have you with us, and you know that we follow very closely your work and what you're doing these days. Radha, Radha, it's human leading human rights advocate and CEO of a British-based organization called Detain in Dubai. Radha, why Detain in Dubai? Why did you think about opening this organization?
Well, it's a strange story, actually. I was working a lot in media and television at the time in 2007, 2008, when one of my colleagues from one of the major production houses in the UK was detained in Dubai. And I didn't even have an idea of, that he was heading there. We're very close. And the next phone call I got was that he'd been detained and accused of taking drugs, which I knew that he didn't do. So I basically took over. His parents were in Australia and went very savvy with these sorts of matters. So I thought, I'm going to step in and help him. And upon investigation, upon appointing a legal team there, we decided to go ahead with a campaign, a public campaign. And ultimately, the investigation led us to determine that, there was absolutely zero evidence against him, that all of the people that had been arrested at the same time were accused of having specks of marijuana dust at the bottom of their bags. And all of the evidence tests came back and returned exactly the same amount, even though these people didn't know each other. And there were about 20 people in this prison. So what we discovered is that these arrests were actually being financially compensated by authorities in Dubai, by the government. So there was an incentive for airport authorities and policemen to just make arrests and make prosecutions. And I mean, it was very new at the time. Most people didn't even know where Dubai was. They weren't traveling through there. It wasn't this major tourism hub or anything. So these are the first kind of cases that came through. And when it hit the media, it hit everywhere all over the world. People were fascinated by it. Where is Dubai? What's happening here?
Okay.
And it was the first time that I think Dubai had been put on the map, and it was for something really negative. So anyway, it's around 7 weeks later, he was released, and all of the work that we did, we created a website, we took it to, the whole world. And it was the first time anyone had spoken about it. So, of course, the next time something like this happened, or other people experiencing problems came across the website, came across all of this media attention, and
Yeah.
contacted me and asked, and by this time I'd had the website Detained in Dubai just for my friend. But we started getting inquiries through this website saying, well, you helped him, can you help me as well? And I thought, wow, this isn't even an isolated incident. And I'm hearing inquiry after inquiry or problem after problem saying, can you help me in this situation, in that situation? It was everything from, drugs to sex outside marriage, a lot of tourism type allegations. But then we also had businessmen and, financial crimes, people who had been accused of a crime. They were innocent and yet they were rotting in jail. No one was helping them. So I just started working on this, and eventually, it just organically grew into what it is today.
It was like
And
this first case. This first case was like the tip of the iceberg, right? Once
yeah,
you start working on this, you discover that there was demand, actually a lot of demand to know, to understand, and people in trouble. No, a lot of people in trouble that travel to Dubai do not understand maybe the laws, and not only the laws is how they work. No, the culture of the country sometimes, and how you're explaining that they take advantage of the law themselves, and officers sometimes make arrests just to get promoted, and all these things people don't realize. And since then it seems that escalated, right? Since then you're being very engaged to a point that you were contact even for from the elite, no, from the family. You had even had to face problems with the family of Dubai, not the ruling family, Al Maktoum. How all this happened? What happened? What really?
yeah,
Uh-huh.
absolutely. I mean, we dealt with so many cases over the past 13 years it is now, actually. So, and each time we were getting more and more coverage and becoming, that sort of everyone knows about you
Yes.
thing. And then we had the ruler's daughter, Sheikha Latifa, contact me from the yacht that she had tried to escape Dubai from, and
Okay.
asking for help. So this is really when the UAE kind of hit back on us as an organization. Until then, they'd almost cooperated. We worked with foreign governments.
Okay.
We'd take cases to the press, and they would
Yeah.
often respond by pardoning someone or letting them go. Or if they saw injustice, they would get involved. Didn't mean they changed anything that was
Okay.
going on or the root causes that were making these problems happen, but they would address it on a case-by-case basis without
Yeah.
much flack back at us, frankly. But when Sheikh Latifah got involved, this issue was personal to the rulers, very personal, obviously. And when that case hit the press, I mean, initially, after her abduction, she was abducted in international waters from a US flagged yacht. At that point, we alerted authorities, we alerted the FBI in America, we alerted the Coast Guard, all sorts of bodies, and it hadn't gone to press at that point, and they were really trying to prevent the matter going to press. They didn't want it in the media, and it was a very hard case to get to media because no one wants to report on something so big and almost unbelievable that the daughter of a ruler of Dubai has escaped the country and accused him of torture. People want to do their press wants to do their due diligence before putting a story like that out. However, we managed to, after a lengthy process, get that out in the media. And the first thing that Dubai tried to do is a disinformation campaign. They tried to attack us as an organization. They tried to, discredit us, discredit our information. They tried to call it fake news. And they actually had a lot of expats and residents in Dubai believing that it was fake news at first. And this is even after it went to press initially. So until it actually went on the BBC, a lot of people just didn't believe the story. But of course, that's all changed now. There's Princess Haya and her stories, and I mean, the UAE has suffered a lot on the sort of royal family tabloid side of things.
Yes.
But at that stage, we actually used social media initially to get those messages out, those emergency messages, and that
And
included Twitter.
do you feel, because you mentioned that the relationship with authorities was cordial, at least at the beginning, no? When you were dealing case by case, things were working out more or less as you expected. But then after, no, what happened with Queen Latifah, did you feel the pressure, more pressure from authorities, perhaps, not to talk about these stories? Or do you suspect some things are going on with this? Also, you last week you mentioned that Twitter, no, because you use a lot of you used to use a lot of Twitter, no, for your communication with clients and possible and for the public, but all of a sudden your account was closed. Huh? This happened, if I'm not mistaken, around June, May last year. And you contact me. This is how we, Radha and I, we got in contact actually because Twitter canceled her account, and as in Skyline, we follow these kind of cases very closely. Do you think there is any connection with what happened since then? Since what all these events with Queen Latifah, this is 2018, I guess 2018, very close to this event. What happened with Twitter? Why did they cancel your account?
Yeah, it's interesting because they haven't responded to my calls or the calls of my lawyers or any sort of disclosure requests, even official. As per the law, they're supposed to disclose according to the GDPR rules, and we've made those applications. They have done a blanket no response. So I think what's happened here is, yes, we have been under a lot more attacks since the Latifah case, but not just Latifah. There's been Princess Haya. And there've been a whole lot of controversies that, we've been involved in and other human rights organizations have highlighted as well. And I think that the UAE and Saudi and other countries are sort of starting to hit back where they can. And that means, some of the Emirates, some of the rulers have been accused of, employing disinformation campaigns, PR campaigns against human rights activists, where they're getting journalists to release information that's just not true. And then we have,
But
hacking. There've been
but there was a particular thing that happened for your account to be closed, a particular tweet that that you sent out, or Do you have any
Well,
idea?
this is a funny thing. When Twitter responded, they gave very little information, but they said that you're not allowed to have multiple accounts. They didn't even say this. I'm inferring that this is what they mean, that you can't have multiple accounts saying the same thing, essentially, or interacting with each other. So, of course, I've got Radha Stirling Twitter account and detained in Dubai, and a couple of others for the other, detained in Doha and due process, these sort of things. So yes, they interacted, they reshared. So I could only assume that, I mean, technically that's what they said, but they
Yes, right.
wouldn't take any argument. They wouldn't
Oh,
give me any information.
true. I mean, we cannot say that there was a tweet or something you
Mm.
sent that it was
No,
unrespectful.
I
Or
think what happened is after the Latifa case, after all of the royal cases had come to light, and the UAE was just being attacked and attacked and attacked, then more cases were coming to light of foreign nationals, British nationals being arrested and falsely accused of, consuming drugs when their evidence test came back and said they hadn't consumed drugs, but they were still being held. And I was again highlighting those in the media. It was another media cycle where the BBC was reporting this particular case every day. And I noticed suddenly at that point a lot of UAE accounts attacking us. So I think that it was a concerted effort of a whole lot of Emiratis, whether or not it was driven by the government or media in the UAE or otherwise. We were suffering a lot of attacks on Twitter, which is unusual. And I think they just had enough of this negative press, but rather than dealing with the situation and dealing with these silly, ridiculous cases, they decided they want to try and censor us. And so I think mass reporting on Twitter is not only a problem for us, but I know many other people who have suffered that kind of, a group of Saudis get together and attack one account, and that account just gets shut down. No question, no appeal.
yes, yes, yes. For
So that's
instance,
what we're looking at.
uh,
And
yes, yes,
at
yes.
that same, sorry.
Yes, let me just stop you there because I think there is something that goes along with what you're explaining. In Twitter, we're following several cases of groups that they got together and harass certain people. And I'm going to read just a quote from Suzanne Coyle. She's a journalist from Der Spiegel, and she lived in Saudi Arabia for a long time. This is Saudi Arabia; it's not the United Emirates, but it explains the relationship, the troubling relationship between Twitter and some of the states in the Gulf. She says, and I quote: "Experts estimate that half of the Saudi Twitter profiles are bots or fake accounts deployed to deceive and influence public opinion. The electronic army traces dissidents and opponents of the regime. They slander and destroy reputation. To do the job," she continues, and I think it is clear, no, what is happening in Twitter, and it is troubling that a company that is supposed to be, one of the top companies out there that should be very concerned, no, about freedom of press, freedom of speech, they end up, having these troubles and having these armies within Twitter. What do you think is happening, Radha? Do you think this is really the case in your case, maybe?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've heard of a number of cases where they've been targeted by these groups. It's been revealed, Reuters has written about it, it's been written about everywhere. But what's being done about it? Nothing much. I mean, not only do we have Twitter's own vested interests, their own commercial endeavors, and their own ideas and political views, and they're using that to censor people. But then we have governments who are going to, and essentially spies or foreign governments are going to use these technical platforms as a mechanism of a kind of information war, and that's really what we have to look out for as well. It's already happening. So we've got the governments trying to censor us or block people whose views they don't like. And we've got Twitter themselves and their own views. We've got people all over the place with vested interests using these platforms. And it's so important now because these platforms have become like the town square. These are where we exchange ideas. These are where we, battle things out and we really get together and have that positive debate that we should have, that exchange of ideas. we used to have in person or through other means, perhaps at a conference or here or there, or a political forum. But now we're actually resorting to social media, which means it is the #1 target of groups, like we said, of these Saudis, of other groups of commercial interests, of government interests, and Twitter's own vested interests. And that's, that's to be said for everywhere as well, with Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. When if they all come together for some reason and want to censor one particular view, and at the moment, obviously everyone's focused on Donald Trump or conservative voices, but that's not where it ends. Even if people support that, they shouldn't support it, because that is just the beginning. They start censoring not only Donald Trump, but people like me, people like to take
True, true. Sometimes they
in
use.
Dubai. They call them fake news.
True, true. They sometimes, these companies, they have amassed too much power. They're private companies, and they kind of own, most of the things and data that is circulating. I mean, they own the rules. No, it's their company, and I think there should be a broader discussion, no, about this. The power they have amassed during this time, and whether there is compatible with private ownership, no? Because at the end, it's or that data that they're sending or selling, or so it's very complicated matter, and I think it's very urgent to take on it. And the Skyline, for instance, is now helping Radha recover her account. We opened a campaign to help Radha recover her account. I will give you the link later on in the chat, or I will put it in the post in Facebook, where you can access this campaign and support Radha in this, I would say, campaign or quest to let her voice be heard, no, and to respect that voice, that it's a very legitimate, I think, claim. Also, Radha, did you ever go to the United Arab Emirates? Did you ever travel there? Do you know the country?
I've been invited there many times, but I didn't want to face any issues there. I'd be so embarrassed. So no.
So you kind of feel that it could be problematic for you to go there. Do you feel that could be
I
the
mean,
case?
absolutely. I mean, after Khashoggi, I don't even want to go to their embassy. So, but I mean, we have people like Ahmed Mansour, who's an Emirati citizen. He's been advocating for a different sort of government, a more democratic system of government in the UAE, and he's currently in prison as a national security risk. And I think that's the other thing that they do with these dissident voices and human rights advocates or political activists, is they brand them as a national security threat, and that means they're kind of dehumanized, they're a terrorist, and we can lock them up and do whatever we want to them. And that sort of behavior is still happening, as we know, in the UAE and Saudi. So I wouldn't go to a country that could potentially have me locked up for life for simply talking about the Sheikha Latifah case. And that was actually a threat from the government, that if people started talking about Princess Latifah, they could be jailed for life in prison. So no, I would avoid it.
Uh-huh. And other Arab countries, just for the sake of knowing that you travel or that you would like to travel?
I mean, I'd love to go everywhere, absolutely. But at this stage, I think the cooperation is too strong that I wouldn't risk it.
Also, I would like to know what is next for Detain in Dubai. What is in your plans for this coming season?
Yeah, well, I mean, absolutely. There's been a lot of change over the past couple of years, really, and also recently with Israel entering the UAE. So that's going to be still a continuation of our focus, and that's going to grow and develop as things do. We've been focusing on the wider Gulf for a long time, but I've also founded Due Process International. So we're looking at bigger issues, and we're looking at some international issues. And censorship, to me, I'm very passionate. I'm a libertarian, essentially. I like personal privacy and smaller government, and I'm so anti-censorship, unless, obviously there are limits, but it's an issue that's really passionate for me. It stemmed all the way, 10 years ago, and you look at what happens in the UAE with censorship and propaganda media, and I think this is an issue for everyone that we should all be really concerned about. So I'm definitely going to be focusing on that with you.
And do you see any attempt from authorities to kind of reach you, or do you see any sign they're listening and they're adapting, or taking into consideration some of these issues that are happening today. What is your take on this?
Adapting to the situation with.
I mean, adapting to this new reality because they have to deal with the world. No, they have now tourists from all over the world. They have now to deal. No, you're seeing how these cases are growing, and the people are kind of they're denouncing, no, and they're not shouting their mouth. They have a problem now. They call you. They tell you, "Hey, this happened in Dubai." Maybe before you open no your your office, people accepted the things that were happening and didn't have a venue to talk about this. But now with you, they have it. Did authorities acknowledge this in any way?
I mean, the authorities acknowledge it in a sense behind the scenes. We've seen a lot of legal changes and a lot of reforms happening. So that's
Or
in response, often directly to some of our campaigns, which is great. And
yes.
then we cooperating with foreign governments. So when we went in, say, Canada, Malaysia, Britain, America, Australia, we've worked with most of the governments, and they've really advocated as well for that change, not only in dealing with whatever case I present to them, but they also encourage those reforms to be made long term. And I think also Israel is going to be quite strong in that respect. I mean, we've already had issues with Israeli tourists and workers there, and it's only been a couple of months. But the Israeli government has really stepped in and resolved those issues, and I think they're not going to take the kind of treatment of their nationals that we've seen, from Britain and America, basically. So that could lead to some long-term reform. As far as criticism of the government, they're still not, they definitely don't welcome that. So no one should speak badly of the government online or even from another country. And that's also going to have to change a little bit as well. But at the moment, with all of the censorship happening, that's also been their main target, is just, again, continuing with anyone who says anything bad, it's disinformation. Look at this wonderful stuff over here. So it's still that same marketing engine that it's always been. And I think that's Gulf-wide as well. And yes, we're going to see some reforms, but they're so minuscule in comparison to the amazing marketing effort that they make about those small reforms that don't actually protect the majority of citizens. So we're going to see that change, but it's going to be quite a long time.
I think no. I think hopefully with time, no, some of the. I mean, you already mentioned how is having an impact, and I hope this impact grows and slowly the United Arab Emirates makes the reforms and changes that needs to make. I mean, at the end of the day, they're claiming they want to have. No, we have the Mohammed bin Salman vision 2030 to change the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and I think that definitely could apply to United Arab Emirates. No, this idea of modernization, and it's not only superficial modernization. They should go deeper into the laws, not into the culture, and find the ways to make law more up to the times we live today.
Well, I think probably one of the major issues that's confused everyone over the past decade or so is the enforcement of them. It's so arbitrary that if I present a case that someone has been arrested for drinking a glass of alcohol, people don't believe it because they're over there and they're drinking alcohol and they haven't been arrested and they don't know anyone who has. But they don't realize that there's actually a substantial portion of people that get arrested for that, and that they think it's almost fake news. So it's like this enforcement standard is so random, and if they addressed that, if they changed the law rather than just arbitrarily enforcing it or only enforcing it a little bit, then they would protect themselves from a lot of the problems and a lot of the criticism of the regime, I think. And I don't even think that many of these laws are supported by the locals or even supported by the rulers, and they just haven't made the effort to reform it. It's a big job.
And I guess a lot of corruption as well. At all levels, there's always a level of corruption that makes things
Absolutely.
very very hard and different from Western countries, etc.
Absolutely. I mean, we've seen lots of issues with corruption, actually. I mean, there's a lot of laws that just obviously need to be changed, and that's if you want to attract investment entrepreneurs and that sort of growth, which is, you know, a major industry for them. But then you've got so many people who are benefiting from it at a corrupt level, and they oppose those sorts of changes. It's going to make it harder for them to make money off foreign nationals, essentially, even if that's illegal. So that's sort of, you know, they've got to powerful and influential locals own hotel chains and really have positions in the government. They don't want the legal changes. So you're also having this argument internally as well. We just don't see it printed in the media.
Great. And thank you, Radha, for your answer. And how people can follow you, Radha? If people want to follow you, know more about your work, how can they follow you? Now that you don't have a
Right.
Twitter account.
Well, it's interesting because, yes, we lost our Twitter accounts and platform, but a lot of the human rights activists who were removed from Twitter arbitrarily again, they because it was one, you know, it's the competitor to Twitter, so they didn't even have an interested in US politics, but they're now being cancelled as well because of what's going on in America. So Parler's down, Twitter's down. So we use our website and our news desk, so Dubai.org, but we've also got a very large following on Facebook, and we haven't had any complaints there. So hopefully Facebook's not going to go down the same sort of censorship route that Twitter has.
Yes. Mm-hmm. True. Thank you, Radha. Thank you so much. I really would love to keep speaking about you because there's so many things I would like to know, but I know you're a busy woman with a lot of commitments and work to do. So I would like to thank you from my part and from my team, from Skyline, for joining us in this amazing conversation and debate about the reality of the region, about your life and your work that I think is so interesting. And I hope we will keep working together in the future in other interviews and activities. Thank you, Radha. Thank you so much. If there's anything,
Me too, Daniel.
Is anything you would like to add?
No, just that your organization is fantastic, and it's always good to talk to you. And enjoy Florida.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I hope we can meet again soon. Thank you, guys.
Yes.
Thank you for following us today with Radha Stirling. I'm waiting. I can't wait for your comments and another remarks on Facebook. See you very soon, guys. Stay there and subscribe. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.